Good morning, friends. It's always good to be with you. As I listen to Johan express his thanks to you for your own commitment to the work of this community, Mosaic, I thought it was an opportunity for me also just to say thank you to you, just to say thank you for, over the years, the opportunity that I've had of being able to share your life and to be here once a month and to share what God puts on my heart with you. So I just want to say thank you for that. It's been a really great grace and gift in my life. I want to share with you this morning a reading that you are so familiar with, and that's so dangerous. Because it's so easy to just tune off and tune out. But I want you to listen to these words that Jesus speaks. It's a story that he told. It's most probably the best known story that we have from the lips of Christ. So let me read it to you. It's in Luke chapter 15. And Jesus continued, and he said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate. I want my inheritance now." And so he divided his property between them, and not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. And so he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out, I will go back to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven, and I have sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me just one of your hired servants.' And so he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And his heart was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him." And so we thank God today for those words, and we pray that through those words that God will speak a living word into each of our hearts this morning. Friends, we begin here at Mosaic today a series of messages on the theme of compassion. For the next 4 weeks, we will be exploring together what it means to become a compassionate person. What it means to live a compassionate life. What it means to be compassionate to our own selves. What it means to be compassionate to others. And so for 4 weeks, that is going to be the focus. And I'm wondering, can I check this out with you? I'm wondering, as I say that, how you feel about that. How do you feel about that? And I have a hunch, it's only a hunch, that we really have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, my sense is that most of us, if not all of us in this auditorium, we like the idea of compassion. It's a positive word. And it evokes very positive feelings within us. I don't think there is anyone in this auditorium who, when they die, want people to say at their funeral, this person lacked totally any compassion. He, she did not have a compassionate bone in their body. I don't think there's anyone here who would want that to be said about them. Somehow, deep down, we know that to be compassionate is to be a human being. And to be a human being is to be compassionate. And yet, having said that, here's the mixed feeling. I also have a hunch that most of us, when it comes to real life, real hurly-burly life in the everyday world that we inhabit, we're not so sure about compassion. We're not so sure about it. If we just look around today, compassion seems to have gone into exile. There's not much of it around. Except for some wonderful, wonderful exceptions. Wonderful exceptions. There's not much compassion in the corporate sector today. Agreed? There's not much compassion in the professions, though even those professions that originally were based on compassion. Not much compassion in politics today, economics, education. Just seems to have disappeared. It almost seems that when it comes to real life, we're not sure about compassion. Someone said to me, it was just this week, we were talking about the fact that we're going on this journey of compassion. She's a mother. She just said to me, Trevor, I've got no time to be Mother Teresa. I've got no time. I haven't the energy. I haven't the time. I haven't the space in my life. I'm just trying to make it through the day. Now, it's against that backdrop, that honest backdrop of mixed feelings, that what I want to do today is I want to extend to you, to every one of you, young, old, black, white, male, female. I want to extend to every one of you a simple invitation. A simple invitation. And it's an invitation for us today to catch a glimpse of the heart of God. I would love us today just to catch a glimpse of the heart of God, the compassionate heart of God. And then I want to invite you and myself to open up our lives, our minds, our hearts, our bodies, to open up our lives to the compassion that God has for each one of us, so that God's compassion can enter us and then begin to flow through us naturally, spontaneously, and freely to every person that we meet. That's my invitation. Can I repeat it? I want you to catch a glimpse of the compassionate heart of God. I want to invite you to open up your heart, to open up your mind, to open up your body to God's compassion so that somehow it can enter us and then flow through us to those who are round about us. Friends, the good news of the Christian faith, is that the God that we worship, please get hold of this today. The God that we have met, the God that we have seen, the God that we have witnessed in Jesus Christ is a God whose heart is filled with compassion. That's the revelation of God in Jesus Christ. And that's why I told you that story. And you know the story well. A boy comes to his father. Jesus is telling the story. He's wanting to describe what God is like. And he says this young guy comes to his father, gets his inheritance. It's almost like saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. I want your money now. The father gives it to him. He goes off to a far country. He spends it. He wastes it. And in the process, he breaks the moral rules, the ritual rules of his own people. He ends up with pigs, looking after pigs. I have never been impressed by this boy's conversion. Who wouldn't go back home when you're with pigs? Huh? And so he turns around. He prepares a speech of repentance and he goes back home. And then we come across one of the most beautiful sentences in the whole Bible. And I want us now to go slowly. I want us to slow down. I want us to read slowly. I want us to go in slow motion. I want us to begin to take in the magnitude of this one sentence that Jesus speaks about the Father. While he was a long way off, his father saw him. His father saw him. Stop. God's compassion sees us. God's compassion notices us. God's compassion is aware of every one of us. God knows each one of us by God's compassion sees us. Notice that. And then with his heart full of compassion, get hold of that. When your heart is full of something, there is no room for anything else whatsoever. Nothing. There's no room for condemnation. There's no room for rejection. There is no room for bitterness. There is no room for resentment. God's heart is full of compassion. And then he runs. I love that. God's compassion. God always moving towards us, always coming towards us, always reaching out towards us. And then he throws his arms around him. Can you maybe just put yourself for a moment in the skin of that prodigal boy, the compassionate embrace of the compassionate father? And then he kisses him. Kisses him. The intimacy, the closeness, the solidarity of God's compassion with each one of us. And Jesus is saying, this is what God is like. This is what God is like. This is the compassionate God that is revealed to us in the life of Jesus. Can I invite you today to begin a journey? I invite myself as well to begin a journey into this heart of God, this compassionate heart of God. And it all begins, let me tell you where it begins. It all begins by getting our picture of God clearer. Our picture of God clearer. That's where it begins. Our ideas, please hear me, our ideas about God shape everything in our life. What we think about God shapes everything in our life. It shapes how we see ourselves. It shapes how we see others. It shapes how we see our work. It shapes how we use our money. It shapes how we see life. It shapes how we see death. We live at the mercy of our ideas about God. And so many of us carry a negative picture of who God is, and it shapes everything. It shapes everything. And Jesus comes. And this is why we follow him. And Jesus reveals through his life and through his death and through his resurrection, he reveals the compassionate heart of God to each one of us, that the God we worship is compassionate. What's your picture of God like? What's it like? Your honest picture of God. Basil Hume, I don't know if you know the name, he was leader of the Catholics in England for many years, about 20, 30 years ago. And he tells the story that when he grew up, his granny always used to say to him, Basil, if you take any of the cookies out of that cookie jar, God will see you and God is going to punish you. Basil has grown up and he got to know God through Jesus Christ, and he says, you know, I think God would say to me now today, Basil, why didn't you take 2? Hey? But can we take one step further? It's not just a case of getting a clearer picture of God. It's also a case, now I go slowly, of letting God's compassion enter our life, so that it can begin to fill us. It's to allow our lives, and I'm going to choose this metaphor carefully, it's to allow our lives to become a reservoir of God's compassion, so that it can just begin to splash out wherever we are. We cannot give what we don't have. I cannot give you God's compassion if it's not in my heart. I can't. And so what I need to do is I need to open my heart up so that God's compassion can begin to flow into my life much more deeply. I came across some words from a preacher from the 11th century nogal, the 11th century, Bernard of Clairvaux. And I very seldom give you a quote, but I took just a few lines from his one sermon, and I just want to read them to you. The words will go up on the screen. He says, the person who is wise, therefore, will see their life more like a reservoir than a canal. The canal simultaneously pours out what it receives. The reservoir retains the water until it's full, and then it discharges the overflow without any loss to itself. Today, there are many in the church who act like canals. The reservoirs are too rare. You too must learn to await this fullness before pouring out your gifts. Do not try, be more generous than God. Isn't that a lovely picture? That so often we try to be canals. We run dry. It's for us to become reservoirs and for the compassion of God to fill us so it just spontaneously, freely, naturally flows out. The best way, can I share with you what I'm learning? The best way to fill our lives with compassion is to take a daily trip to the cross of Christ. A daily trip. To go to the cross and to take to the cross all those things in my life that block compassion. My anger that I feel, it blocks compassion. My selfishness, it blocks compassion. My self-centeredness, it blocks compassion. And to take those things, to confess them, sometimes many times, and to say to God, To say to Christ, Christ, will you, as I give you my anger, as I give you my resentment, my bitterness, my self-centeredness, my selfishness, will you begin to put in its place your compassion so that my life can be a reservoir? Just a reservoir. Will you let your life become a reservoir? Will you let Christ meet you? Will you receive from him his compassion? And then lastly, here's my last thought. We can start this as we leave the auditorium. Let's just begin to be a compassionate presence with those who are struggling. Just to be a compassionate presence. To give them the gift of your compassionate presence. Compassion is more than pity. We don't give people pity. Compassion is more than sympathy. It's more than sympathy. Compassion is even more than empathy. Compassion is even more than actions, even though it includes actions. Can I give you the meaning of compassion? Compassion is to suffer with another human being. To suffer with another human being. That's compassion. Compassion says almost to another human being, I'm not scared of your pain. I'm not scared of your suffering. And like God is with us, I want to be with you. And I want to enter as deeply as I can the pain and the anguish and the hurt of your life. I simply want to be present. That's compassion. I'm only standing here today because of some people who've been compassionate in my life. I never forget when I was studying at Rhodes, best university in South Africa. I was for 4 years with the social work department. Professor Francesca Lagrange, wonderful woman. And I used to say to her, Prof, how can I help people? And she would say to me, Trevor, just give them your compassionate presence. And I say, no. How can I help them? She said, no. Just give them your compassionate presence. And I would say, no, but what can I do for them? What can I say? What are the clever words? She said, no, don't worry about that. Just give them your compassionate presence. Suffer with them. It's the greatest gift we can give to another human being. Can I give you one practice this week? Just one. Can I ask you to think of someone that you know who's in a bad place, in a hard place? Just one person. Just one person. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's your child. Maybe your child has gone through a breakup. I often say sorry to my kids that when they went through their first breakups, I was so insensitive to that moment. Maybe it's a colleague at work who's battling with depression. Maybe it's someone who's just been retrenched. Maybe it's someone that you know who's gone through a divorce. Maybe it's someone who's been told that they're dying, stage 4 cancer. Think of one person. And say to God, God, this week I'm going to give this person 20, 25, 30 minutes of my time. And I want to give them the gift of my compassionate presence. No solutions, no neat answers, no counsel. I want to just offer this person the gift of my compassionate presence. And maybe you can ask them one question, just one question. Would you mind telling me what you're going through at the moment? Would you mind telling me? I want to be with you. It's the greatest gift we can give to those who hurt. So let me end. The God that we worship is a God that we meet in Jesus Christ. The God that we worship is a God who sees us from a long way off, notices us, is aware of us. The God that we worship is a God whose heart is full of compassion, who runs towards us, wants to hold us in God's compassionate embrace, no matter what we've done, no matter what sin wants to hold us, and then wants to give us that deep kiss of deep intimacy. That's the God we worship. Can we open our lives up to this compassion today so that our lives and our hearts become reservoirs, so that compassion just begins to splash out on anyone who's around us? And can we give to those who hurt in our own lives the gift, the precious gift of our compassionate presence? Let's pray together. Dear God, we always battle to find words to get to your heart because it's so big, and it's always better than we think or can say or can imagine. Will you reveal to each one of us personally, reveal to us through Jesus, through his life, through his death, through his resurrection, will you reveal your heart that our hearts may be touched by your heart, and that we may be able to give to 1, 2, 3 other people the gift that you have given us of your compassion. This is our prayer, and we offer it to you with all the love and with all the longing of our hearts. And we say together as God's people, Amen. Friends, through the week you can get daily readings on the Mosaic website just to embed this theme into your life. May the joy of Christ be with you. Bless you, friends. Amen.